Hello and welcome to Talk Lit Get Hit, a podcast where we read viral books the internet won't shut up about and rate them lit or shit.
We're your hosts, Bridget and Laura, lovers of sad girl fiction and tragic endings, fearers of smut, urban fantasy, and the who did this to you trope.
Join us as we pick apart all the books the internet loves
And embark on a journey to figure out why.
Here Comes a Bride, fair, fat, and widely praised as containing humour, twisty plots, and spice that doesn't quit. For our last monthly book of the year, and ticking off on fantasy, the final genre we'll be exploring in 2024, we are revisiting an old friend and reading Bride by Ali Hazelwood. Bridget, hello, hello.
Hello, hello. Nearly the last hello for the year.
Oh, will I change it up in 2025?
I don't know. Can we handle that?
How's your month been?
It's been good. I actually have some really good news. So a few months ago, I placed a click and collect order at Woolworths.
Yeah.
And I'm really obsessed with this toothpaste from Colgate. Not sponsored, but please sponsor me. And it's like rainbow hearts. I don't know what it's actually called. And they have little heart-shaped.
I know the one.
You squeeze it out on your brush and then it's upsetting when you don't get the little hearts. And like Brian and I are both like, did you get hearts?
It's like the Pokemon cereal with the little marshmallows.
We never had that, but that sounds nice. It sounds like the same sort of thing. So I placed an order because I was like, I don't know if this is limited edition, so I'm going to get 3. But for some reason, the people at Woolworths, instead of packing 3 rainbow fresh breath hearts or whatever, they gave us peach flavored toothpaste and it's absolutely awful. And we have just been powering through these 3 tubes of peach flavored toothpaste for months. And we're finally to the end of them and I'm so happy.
Yay!
It's disgusting. Don't ever buy it. I am fully aware that the rainbow hearts might sound awful, but it's just like a nice normal flavour. Plus it has rainbow hearts inside it.
I totally see the appeal. My favourite kind of toothpaste is the kind that's like blue and glittery.
Yes.
Completely unnatural. Get it in me.
Other than that, I am out of a reading slump, which is very exciting. I did try to go through what I'd read to sort of find some notable mentions, and I haven't read that many good ones.
It's kind of a bummer.
Because I was feeling really positive about it, and then I looked and I was like, I don't really have any I want to talk about, but I did reread Twilight, which we will talk about. So I read the whole series and had a lovely time with that.
You did. You were actually messaging me quite a bit with your thoughts and feelings, and there were a lot.
Yeah. It's amazing how things change.
What a year can do.
What a year. Other than that, I did listen to Best of Friends by Camilla Shamsi. And that was about 2 young girls who grew up in Pakistan until they were ripped apart by the political climate at the time. I read books 5 and 6 of the Bridgerton series. They were better than the other ones. So I might keep reading because there's not many left. Maybe I'll just knock them out and then I never have to do it ever again.
I think at this point you have to see it through to the end.
And they're getting better as they go on. The last 2, Eloise's book and Francesca's book, weren't the same boring shit as the other ones. So that has made me a little bit more positive for the books and I guess the direction the show's heading as well.
If it lasts that long, hey, will I be 40 by the time their seasons are coming out?
Especially if they're taking 2 years to film.
For a pittance of episodes.
Absolutely crazy. The last book that I want to talk about was one that was a bit of a disappointment, and it was Men Have Called Her Crazy by Anna Marie Tendler, and she is John Mulaney's ex-wife. I didn't really know either of them. I just, was watching from afar, and I did really like her Portraits from the First House, I think it was called, that photographic series on Instagram, and I thought that she was really cool until I read the book.
Oh.
And I just don't think that anymore.
Oh. Commiserations, Anna Marie.
I listened to a really good review on the Celebrity Memoir Book Club podcast about this book, and they absolutely slammed it. And she hates them. She's got them blocked.
Oh.
Pre the episode, I think for a few years now. So it was quite interesting to listen to that. Other than that, it's been really hot the last week. And that's really sad.
Stinking.
I got in my car the other day. It was 38 degrees. That was great. Anyway, how about you?
Yeah, I've been good. Sort of same old, same old. It really struck a chord with me when you said that you could see the temperature in your car, because I got a new car and I now have basic safety features like a reverse camera. I have electric windows, Bluetooth, and a car that tells you what the temperature is outside is also something that I have now.
It is amazing, isn't it? Like these things that people have been living with for so long.
Yeah.
One thing that's really struck me about my new car is the fact that the fuel light comes on.
Yes.
I never had a fuel light before.
Mine was broken too. That's so funny.
How the other half live.
I know. I'm like telling people, I'm like, it's the darndest thing. You can roll down 4 windows all at once while you're driving.
It doesn't take 30 seconds to roll up a window.
I really feel like I wasn't excited enough for you when you got your new car because you were telling me like going for a drive is fun now. And I was like, I couldn't imagine it would be. But let me tell you, it is.
It's
the rumors are true.
Fun. Just cruising around for no reason.
Yeah. And just like, not having to use the little Bluetooth transmitter, like radio transmitter that picks up other people's Bluetooth signals and like, it's so good.
The day that my stereo died in my car, it was a cassette one. This was like maybe 4 or 5 years ago, but that was like a mix of a blessing and a curse because like I couldn't use that transmitter thing anymore to get music. But then the good thing was I didn't have to use the transmitter thing anymore. Like it's like silence or pain. But then I did eventually get a Bluetooth speaker. So that's another good thing to not have to use as well. It just feels so bogan. Man. These like little thieves tried to break into my car to steal it once. So they really wanted that Bluetooth speaker. So that's very exciting for you.
It is very exciting. Apart from that, the only other thing I can think of is that after all of our big chat in our A Good Girl's Guide to Murder episode about not dressing up for Halloween and not caring about Halloween, I did in fact dress up for Halloween and I cared so much.
I think you said you were going to dress up as the rental crisis. Is that what you ended up?
No. I felt so edgy for saying that, I have to say. I was like, yeah.
I know politics.
Yeah, I'm engaged. We were aiming for an easy couples costume and what I thought would be an easy costume turned out to be quite an ordeal. We went as the 2 main characters from the movie Eagle versus Shark and like specifically in their eagle and shark costumes. And looking at the costumes in the movie, they're very like homemade. His eagle collar is sort of like made out of a towel. It looks like he's got like a teddy bear eye for his eagle thingy, like, you know.
Eagle thingy. It's an eagle thingy.
You know, the thingy.
Do you mean penis?
Bridget, we're trying to not get an explicit rating on this show.
Do you mean beep?
I actually have no idea like what the heck I was even talking about.
Do you mean like a beak or?
I think I meant head. Like the main total big part of the eagle, their face. Sorry, this is such a segue. But it reminds me of this time. I used to work with these freaking engineers and it was excruciating because they always try to talk to me and they just... The lunchroom chatter was excruciating. And one time this guy was talking. I didn't have to participate in this conversation, but I was eavesdropping. And he was like... watching her make her lunch and she was just cobbling together like, you know, some chickpeas, some spinach, a little bit of tofu and stuff. And he was like, are you a vegan? And she said, no. And then he was like, well, that looks like a vegan meal. And she said, yeah, I guess it is. I don't eat that much meat. And then he was like, did you see what the vegan guy said? And she was like, sorry? And he was like, you know, like the main vegan. She was like, no, I don't know who you mean. And he got frustrated and he was like, oh, like the total main big vegan.
The president of the vegans.
The vegan overlord.
The vegan, like, capital letters TV.
Who the hell does he mean?
I think Pete Evans, surely.
I don't know.
He must be the big vegan.
The total main big vegan. I can't do it, but he had a South African accent as well. So just like so good to hear him saying total main big vegan, like again and again. All that to say, I severely overestimated my sewing skills.
That's how they get you though, because they've obviously constructed these costumes in such an artistic and creative way. You think, I could do that. It looks homemade.
Yeah.
But then you did it and you did look like you were part of the KKK.
I did. I was so glad I had fins. It was really dicey. Anytime Brown wasn't with me at the party, I was like, quick, find him, because I just desperately needed the context of having him next to me. And I also like cut the mouth hole way too big.
Gaping.
Yes, gaping, like my boobs were out. Like, thank God it wasn't, I don't know, the only thing that I was wearing. And before can you imagine what an assault to the senses? But before I put the...
Equal versus shark, but make it sexy.
But I couldn't figure out, like, bias tape binding is like my sleep paralysis demon. I cannot figure out how makes straight piece go round shape. Like, you know, like when you put it...
what you're talking about.
Okay, well, it's like you sew it over like the raw edge of a seam to make it like neat, and it's like this piece of fabric. There's probably sewists that are like, wrong, but like you fold it in half and then it gets sewn over the raw edge to make it look finished. And I could not figure out the logistics. And I was like, I'll just sew it down once. And then it looked like a vagina. And the way that my little pointy hat pulled it up, it was like, it was very much a vulva. Alrighty, let's kick off the episode. Bridget, I would love to know your initial thoughts, expectations, hopes and dreams heading into reading Bride by Ali Hazelwood.
The night that I started reading Bride was the night that I finished the Twilight reread. And so I was feeling primed to keep reading about vampires and werewolves. I was in the mood for more lowbrow vampire shit. But I have heard surprisingly good things about this book. Some people on BookTok that I've seen that normally have quite sensible opinions have said that they really liked it more than her other books. So I was like cautiously positive going in.
I think I was also cautiously positive about this book, which is crazy because I hated the love hypothesis. But similarly, I think I've seen fairly positive things about it. And I think it's enough of a vibe shift from her usual women in STEM rinse and repeat that I thought it might work for me for whatever reason, because I think the feedback I was seeing was that it was quite different. So I guess I wasn't necessarily expecting to like it, but I was still kind of curious about it.
This episode will contain spoilers for the book Bride by Ali Hazelwood. If you're yet to read it and would like to keep your mind untarnished, pause the episode now and make sure to come back once you've read the book.
This month, we are fortunate to have a list of content warnings straight from Ali Hazelwood's website. In this episode, you're likely to hear discussions of themes of death, kidnapping, mild violence, poisoning and attempted murder, explicit and graphic sexual content, and a special mention to knotting. If you know, you know.
Misery Lark, the only daughter of the most powerful vampire councilman of the Southwest, is an outcast again.
Her days of living in anonymity among the humans are over.
She has been called upon to uphold a historic peacekeeping alliance between the vampires and their mortal enemies, the Wares, and she sees little choice but to surrender herself in the exchange again.
Wares are ruthless and unpredictable, and their alpha, Lo Morland, is no exception.
He rules his pack with absolute authority, but not without justice. And unlike the Vampire Council, not without feeling.
It's clear from the way he tracks Misery's every movement that he doesn't trust her. If only he knew how right he was.
Because Misery has her own reasons to agree to this marriage of convenience. Reasons that have nothing to do with politics or alliances, and everything to do with the only thing she's ever cared about.
And she is willing to do whatever it takes to get back what's hers, even if it means a life alone in Were territory. Alone with the wolf. All right, Bridget, I am desperate to know how you felt about Bride by Ali Hazelwood.
I have a short story to tell you about my journey with this book. So last weekend, I think, I went out for breakfast, one of my favourite cafes, and I took the book and I was once again embarrassed to be reading one of the podcast books in public. So I was quite vigilant about hiding the cover because this one just looks...
Say less. We've all seen it.
I don't need to say anything else. But I had just put it down, made my decision and announced to Brian that I was ashamed to say that I was really into it. And the waitress came over and she was like, "Rosemary vanilla iced latte?" And I was like, "That's me." And she was like, "Oh my God, are you enjoying that book? My sister told me I have to read it." And I was like, just froze. And I was like, embarrassingly, yes. And she said, "Don't worry, I've read so much worse." So she was really nice. She made my worst nightmare not that bad of being like perceived while reading a podcast book. If I was a braver person, I would have been like, actually, I'm reading it because I'm going to talk about it on a podcast, but I did not do that.
I know.
Yeah.
I never have once, but I've thought about it so many times.
Brian said to me after, do you want me to say it for you? And I was like, no.
Please, God, no.
So that was about a week ago. I think I read it in one day. The majority of it read it in one day and finished it. And I was like, wow, I really like this book. We'll talk about this later, but there was a point where I was sort of like, I don't like this anymore. But then I left it for a few days, didn't think about it too much, but then I started listening to the audiobook, hurt my own feelings.
Oh,
it's the same thing as The Good Girl's Guide to Murder. Awful audiobook.
I didn't mind it.
Oh, we'll talk about this. But how did you feel?
Well, I don't know what cosmic shift has occurred in my brain over the last year, but I also did not hate this. I also would actually say that I enjoyed reading it up until the last 50 pages where I was like, oh, now I really don't know who I am anymore. I don't know. I actually had no notes throughout reading this. I was just like, this is ridiculous. This is crazy. Oh, okay, that's happening. All right, okay. But at the same time, I was surprisingly sucked into it. So like you, I did go back a second time and I listened to the audiobook, which I didn't hate and which we'll talk about later. And then when I thought about it some more, had some thoughts. But overall, genuinely speechless, shocked at how much I enjoyed this.
Maddie picked me up and I got in the car and I was like, oh my God, this book is so good. This happens and this happens and this happens. And I think that was before they had met the governor. For me, that's when it started to go downhill.
I would agree with that. We last read an Ali Hazelwood book on the podcast in January 2023, and that was Ali Hazelwood's first book, The Love Hypothesis, which was published in 2021. Since then, Ali has written 11 other books. I think 2 of them
oh my God.
are not yet released. They're slated for release next year, but that's 12 books written in under 4 years. I know plenty of authors are prolific, and I did see a comment, someone saying we don't criticize academics or people writing assignments or whatever it may be when they're churning out books at this rate. I do have this sort of cynicism in my mind when I see someone churning out books so rapidly.
I agree with you. And I remember maybe earlier in the year or maybe towards the end of last year, Jack Edwards stitched, I think, an indie author who said they had written or drafted 4 books in 3 months. And he said, I don't know if that's the flex you think it is. And he got a lot of hate for that, but I agree with him. I just think that's a lot of books.
It is a lot of books.
In 3 months.
And I guess it depends on what kind of book you're looking for, because Ali Hazelwood's books are undeniably a rinse and repeat. And that's not really the type of book I'm often looking for. I don't want to consume a lot of books like that. That's not to say those books don't have meaning or purpose, but they're not going to be some big artistic achievement.
And not all of them have to be, but at the end of the day, it is his opinion as a literary critic that he thinks an author who writes 4 books in 3 months maybe isn't churning out things that need to be churned out quite so much. What hurts the book by taking a little bit more time with it?
On that note, Bridget, you have read some other Ali Hazelwood books, and contrary to Erin and I, you didn't actually completely hate The Love Hypothesis when we talked about it. So what were the other books like?
I think that The Love Hypothesis is one of the first romances I read when I started coming out of my book snob phase. And I was like, oh, books can be fun. Books that aren't Twilight can be fun. So that was a bit of an eye-opener for me. I then read Love on the Brain and I absolutely hated that book. It was a worse retelling of The Love Hypothesis. I was then traumatized by the term STEMinist novellas when I read the novella collection of Loathe to Love You, and that was the 3 novellas of Under One Roof, Stuck With You, and Below Zero. They were absolutely awful. I think I read that the first time I had COVID. Did not help the situation at all. Then I read Love Theoretically, which I can't remember anything about other than the fact that it has a Twilight mention in nearly every chapter. So I was pretty into that. And then finally I read Check and Mate, which is her YA book.
didn't realize you'd read so many. What the hell?
I know. Neither. When I was researching, I was like, wow.
What the
I
hell?
was really hoping that I would get something like The Love Hypothesis. But Check and Mate was actually really, really good. It was a bit more innocent than the others. It made me happy. It wasn't gross. And it was also about chess. Now, I don't know how to play chess. Like a few people have tried to teach me and I retain it for like 20 minutes after we've finished the lesson and then I never think about it ever again. But it was about chess. I'm really into books and things about chess. Like I'm thinking intermezzo. I really love the chess in there. I always watch the Queen's Gambit on TikTok.
Yeah.
I love the chess scenes in there. And this book was about chess and I really, really liked it. So
An unrealized passion.
yeah, and it's also a closed door romance as well, which is good. I think that's sort of helped its case. There was no gross
Keep it to
sex
yourself,
scenes.
thanks.
Good, it was enjoyable. So I haven't read Not in Love, but I think I do have that somewhere to read. The only other one is her audiobook only book, which is Two Can Play. Deep End comes out in 2025. So apparently I'm a big fan,
Yeah.
even though I hated half of them, more than half.
I'm stunned into silence. I think one of my main takeaways from this book was that it just felt so much more purposeful than The Love Hypothesis did. And granted, that's my only Ali Hazelwood book that I've read, but I mean, I know we say all the time how things just kept happening and there was no real motivation behind any of the events. And so I was pleased and relieved to find that that wasn't the case with Bride. But I did read an interview with Ali Hazelwood that kind of expanded on this, and I thought it was really interesting. It came from the Writer's Digest, and unfortunately it was called How I Combine Plotting and Pantsing in My Writing. And she had a section, How I Used to Write. Ali Hazelwood did have her start writing fan fiction. And so in the section under How I Used to Write, she said, before traditional publishing, I exclusively wrote fan fiction and midterm essays and statements of purpose and scholarly papers, but those probably don't count. The fics I wrote varied in length and scope, but I usually don't worry too much about plotting them in advance. I'd simply focus on gathering 4 items: a setting, a starting point, a conflict, and an end. For instance, the characters are roommates. Initially they hate each other, then they slowly warm up to the other, but have issues admitting their feelings because of their emotional baggage. But despite all of that, they end up together.
Yeah, I was listening to a podcast that she appeared on, The Shit No One Tells You About Writing, and she said that she started with Star Trek fan fiction and she was in love with Commander Spock and then she moved to Star Wars fan fiction on AO3. And then her agent started to read her fan fiction and told her that if she was interested in publishing in the traditional way, that her writing would translate well to original stories. So then she reworked it from her original fan fiction.
Okay.
She did also say that she wasn't exceedingly popular on AO3. She was pretty popular within her fandom, but she wasn't one of the authors that we often hear about, I guess Senlin Yu and other people like that.
Tobeans 69 or whatever it was.
Taylor Swift.
Interestingly, from there, she says, how I write now. This is what I do now. Once I've settled on my story idea, I divide it into 3 acts, which is something that I've probably learned from one of the dozens of craft books I've read to make the writing process feel easy. This has not happened yet. Then I write down a list of things I want to happen in each of the acts. For instance, in the roommate scenario discussed earlier, I'd ask myself the questions, why are the characters enemies? What prompts them to have the first conversation as something more than enemies? How do they transition from enemies to reluctant friends? What prevents them from acknowledging their feelings? I've cut out the answers she provided to these questions, but I think it's so evident that she's going through this basic narrative line of questioning in Bride, where I really don't think she was that much in The Love Hypothesis.
And it's actually so endearing that she's reading craft books and to figure out how to craft her writing skill. I love that.
And I think it shows.
You can
really
tell.
shows.
Yeah. Check and Mate was released 2023 and I think that's the best of the ones in the past. And I think you can tell that she's getting better in every book. Good on you.
Yeah.
I also like about her that she is very upfront about what kind of things that she writes. She said in the same podcast episode that she writes pretty tropey stuff. So she has a real rom-com writing style. She's not out here trying to change the world. She's just trying to write romantic comedy.
And again, I think that comes with honing her craft, because I think I really struggled with the love hypothesis. It might have been obvious to some. It was not obvious to me at all if this was meant to be a cheeky kind of like poking fun at the genre type book or if it was just a bit of a hot mess. Whereas I think with my experience of Bride, I feel like it was very obviously like quite referential to the genre. I found it more obvious when it was making fun and when it wasn't.
The funny thing about the love hypothesis is like it wasn't very good. But the colossal success is pretty staggering. So it was released in September 2021. A second printing was ordered less than 24 hours after the book went on sale. It was an instant New York Times USA Today bestseller. It was on all the bestseller lists. It was Book of the Month selection at Apple and Amazon Best of the Month book. And film rights were also picked up pretty early on in the release.
Whoa.
It would be interesting to see how her success has tracked with the release of each book. I did hear a lot about this book when it was first released, but I don't see too many people reading it often and talking about it. But I also might put that down to the fact that my algorithm wouldn't show me this review.
Yeah, likewise. I saw a bit about it when it came out and I saw, surprisingly positive reviews. But from there, it just hasn't really persisted in any of my feed. We're probably on the same algorithm.
Yeah.
Kind of similar to when we read The Hating Game. I'm looking at the reviews, I'm looking at the 1 stars, I'm looking at the 5 stars, and I'm seeing the criticisms being made in the 1-star reviews and the outrage, the disgust. Everybody's up in arms about the knotting. Everybody's up in arms about like, it's a marriage of convenience. It's not enemies to lovers. Misery's boring. Lowe's stupid, whatever it is. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, yeah, it's not that serious.
Yeah.
And it's just so funny because I have so often been on the other side, like deeply in that outrage. And now I feel so smug. I'm on the other side and I'm like, guys, touch grass.
It's just a silly, goofy book.
It's not that serious. But I do think there's also a difference. I don't think there's like mishandled serious themes in this book, which is probably a major instigator for me feeling outraged when a bad book is getting good reviews. Like Hannah Grace, where there are actual very serious, meaningful plot lines like, you know, eating disorders and emotional abuse. I don't think there's really anything like that happening in this book.
I also read a little bit about how she wrote these two characters, Misery and Lowe, and she said that she wanted these two people to have reasons to kind of be distrustful of each other, and she wanted them to be attracted to each other at the same time. She wanted them to have big differences, but also small cultural differences that would make it fun for them to understand each other, reconcile that, and then eventually fall in love. She had fun writing about vampires and werewolves because the lore surrounding these species, it changes depending on what series or what book or what media you're consuming, and you can do whatever you want because it's not real, which I think ties into what we were just talking about. Like it's a little bit less serious when, you know, we're discussing the politics between the vampires, the werewolves and the humans for the last 300 years. And she also said that she just loves the idea of being able to take something that she loves and just add something in as a detail because she's not constrained by actual science. With her scientific background, her academic scientific background, that would be a bit of a roadblock for you if you're trying to be imaginative. You think, well, hang on, that doesn't work.
Yeah.
Like Stephanie Meyer doesn't have any of those constrictions.
No.
It's like she'll just do whatever she wants. But I think Ali Hazelwood probably has like that knowledge and she's like, well, I can't make them do this because that doesn't work like that. But when they're made up, you can do whatever you want.
Yeah, the pigment's gone. It's in my book.
So I just like how she sort of removed these restrictions for herself. She's just made a fun, interesting, entertaining book.
Yeah, I agree. I actually am so shocked because one of my first notes was like, ew, modern fantasy.
Yeah.
And I was fully prepared to hate it. And then it just never hit me.
Same. I was like, I love that they have phones. I love that they're Googling. I love that the kid is going to go and play Grand Theft Auto.
Yeah.
And, why?
I know. I feel sick in the head.
What's wrong with us?
Oh. A couple of our listeners did say, Bride is fun. You're going to have fun. And I was like, please stop telling me that. I don't want to have to let you down. Like, I was getting so stressed because I hate so much. Like, it's a part of the show that I sometimes feel a bit uncomfortable with. I hope that we are fair in our assessments of these books, and I hope that we give like appropriate like caveats and leverage to both sides, but it does feel like so shit when you're like, we're going to be reading this book and people message and they're excited and they're like, I loved it, it's my favorite book, and you already have this feeling of like, oh shit. Well, maybe don't listen to this episode. Pleased to report it was good.
We have actually had feedback before that like people disagreed with us, but they said that they still, you know, understood where we were coming from, still enjoyed the episode. And I just hope that we never come across as like super preachy or like super, I don't know, snobby about these books. But I mean, the track record is getting more positive.
Yeah. And I think that has actually been a journey of doing the show because like we have been saying recently, this is a podcast for recovering book snobs. The book snobs are us.
Yes.
And I think this is a journey I've been on myself. And I think it's kind of playing out in real time on the show.
Yeah, it's so intriguing. Another thing that I was shocked that I liked that I in the past have like been poo-pooing, disgusted by is the existence of an alpha male. And at no point I was like, ew, he's so misogynistic. He just thinks he's in control of everything. Like he controls it. I never thought that once. I was into it. I liked him.
I liked him too. I 99% liked him, or maybe bump it down to 90. There are a couple of things where I was like, okay.
This is a quote from Ali Hazelwood. It was from the same podcast. And she said, I would say it depends on what alpha male means to you. For me, I know that there is a lot of literature that being an alpha male means that you're ordering people around and deciding what happens in their relationship and sort of like treating women like they are more of an object. But for me, the reason I wanted Lo to be an alpha, like he needed to be an alpha because he needed to be the leader of his pack, because that was how I was able to, you know, make his marriage of convenience to misery possible. But it's interesting. The idea of the alpha male is that he's someone who's powerful. And for me, being powerful also means being confident. And to me, a confident person doesn't act all jealous and doesn't tell others what they can or cannot do. It's just not something that I think is inherently attractive. That's not the type of alpha male that I particularly enjoy writing. It's about what I enjoy writing and what I find actually attractive. I don't even think about it too much. I find a guy who's trying to order around someone just kind of ridiculous personally. And once again, hit the nail on the head.
What the hell? I'm like, I have whiplash. I don't understand. Yes, Ali, yes.
She's so right.
I'm in love with you, Ali. Oh my God. Oh, I'm so humbled right now. I agree with this because I kind of went in. So for once I did reread the blurb. I went in thinking he was meant to be like ruthless and terrifying. But then when I read the blurb again, it was like, Wares are ruthless and unpredictable. Lo is no exception. He rules his pack with absolute authority, but not without justice. And unlike the Vampire Council, not without feeling. And like when you actually read that, it's not like he kills everyone in his path and he's terrifying and he like slaughters children for fun, which is what I was sort of expecting him to be. I liked that he was soft and sensitive and rational and caring and empathetic.
Yep.
I loved at the same time that it wasn't dual POV. I didn't especially want to be in his head. Those little slices of his thoughts that you got at the start of the chapter, that's all I needed to hear.
And see, this is one of the problems I had with the audiobook because the audiobook hired a man to read those bits. And it was not good. But it was, that was one of the problems.
Down with men.
What is this in my ears? Actually, this is the problem with the whole audiobook for me. I haven't even finished it yet. I'm going to force myself to finish it. But in my head, Misery was so funny. The way that I was like reading her voice, she was hilarious. She was like flippant. She was sarcastic. She was just funny. But the way that the narrator phrased, like interpreted her words was just so painful, like millennial BuzzFeed, like all that stuff that we always talk about, pumpkin spice, shit, doggo, toe beans.
Yeah.
I just really dislike that particular accent when it's reading words like this line, for example, I don't know enough about the wares to get offended on their behalf, is funny. Like that's a funny line when you just read it on the page.
Yeah.
But then in the audiobook, it would be like, I don't know enough about the wares to get offended on their behalf. Like it's just so stupid.
Calm down with the pizzazz, please.
Yeah, it's too much pizzazz. It's exactly what it is. And it's too much like, I did a thing. I kissed a werewolf. Like,
Yeah.
it's, but the men also, like the starts of the chapters, when I was reading it, I was like, oh, I really like this. Like, I think it's cute. But then that's what the vibe was like in the audiobook. And I just...
Some nights, when he's walking past her door, he has to whisper to himself, keep going.
Yeah, and I hate that. But on the page, love it. This marriage, it's going to be a problem. She is going to be a problem.
Being gone is a relief and sheer agony.
It's really giving Jacob, like, life sucks and then you die.
Well,
he feels like the entire world is in the palm of his hand. Coming soon to cinemas near you. She distracts him. His feelings for her, they distract him. Just shut up.
I do agree with you about the audiobook. It was not at all on the level of, what the hell was that book called?
Good Girl's Guide to Murder.
Yeah, it was not at all.
There's nothing worse.
Hippo! Thank God.
Hey, chica.
A jiffy. I can't remember what the accent was. I got a bit goblin-esque.
We haven't got it right.
But I 1,000%. I do understand. I'm glad that I read it first.
Same.
As an actual eyes on the page book.
I'm glad I wrote my notes before.
I agree that Misery was very funny.
I mean, I have so many notes. Like, one of my sections is just lol. And there's like 10 different quotes that I thought was so funny that I had to immortalize in my notes.
Yeah.
Like, one of them, no amount of legal tender would convince me to, is it $10 billion? Like,
yeah.
Another one on page 86, we're all bad bitches till a scowling were stands outside the bathroom door while we're washing our hair.
Yeah.
Like, she's just so like melancholy, but not in a poor me way. It's just like, well, I'm just living on this earth until I die. That's the way I read it. And I do love that sort of vibe. I also just found that Misery dealt with the intense, intimate, and just frankly weird moments, like when he had to mark her the same way that I would. And she said, I deal with it the only way I can, laughing. Like, she's making jokes. She's just trying to diffuse the tension of this weird situation. And it's really refreshing to see a character act like this after reading so many books where the stakes are always the highest, always so dramatic, and it's like their bosoms are heaving. And she's just like, are you going to give me a wet willy?
Yeah.
It's just so dumb, but I found it like quite realistic. Another thing was on page 183 when they were getting into the plane, and she said, honey, are we rich?
Yeah.
It's just so funny. But then in the audiobook, like that tone was just all wrong for me, and I just didn't find it funny at all.
I think she was very funny. And I also think that she was a real badass. Like, I don't think I've almost ever read a book where reviews or blurbs tell you Misery Lark is a badass vampire or whatever, and it actually carries through. But there was a line she had at the end that was so cold after her father has betrayed her and is like locked up. Lo says, you still haven't told me what you'd like me to do with your father. Misery says, I don't care. I leave it to you two. I grip the door handle, still feeling his heat in my fingers. Without turning, I add, unless the need arises, feel free to never tell me what you settle on. Oof.
Cold.
And the hand on the door handle, yeah.
It's like an afterthought.
Yeah. You may go, that kind of vibe.
I also liked that she was hot. She knew that she was hot. She wasn't ever thinking like, I'm not good enough for him. He's so handsome and I'm so ugly. We don't have to do any of that.
Thank God she didn't have a chip on her shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
I also liked that although in this universe vampires and wares weren't like equally matched, you know, like as we saw in Twilight, you know, who will win in a fight? The vampires have impenetrable skin and werewolves can like rip you to shreds. It didn't really seem like vampires were that indestructible in this universe. And because she had spent so much time living outside of her own society, she wasn't even particularly vampiric. vampiric. I don't know why I chose to use that word, but unfortunately I did. But what I liked was that she was useful in other ways. Her practical human skills of like hacking and coding and like, you know, understanding how to use the internet. It was like, yeah, this is actually useful. Like people ought to know. I wish that we got to see more of that, and I wish that it didn't get offloaded to that werewolf guy. It would have been cool to see her be a bit more useful there. And I liked that she had a tangible skill that is honestly, maybe it's because I teach like digital literacy day in, day out, and I watch people like not know what Google is and not know how to use a search bar and like what keywords are, but her walking low through his tech illiteracy was so like, this is good. You have a lot to offer, Misery. You have a lot to offer. Although I found her smarter and funnier than I could ever have thought possible, I'm still disbelieving that Ali Hazelwood found a way of writing a female character that had never been kissed and was still somehow a virgin.
I will say that it made a lot more sense in this than it did in The Love Hypothesis.
Yes, that is a good point.
That's her studying coming into play as well. Like she's thought about it. She thought about, why is this girl going to be a virgin? I have an idea. It checks out.
How can I have a tall character that's still a small girl? Got it. Make him huge.
Make him a literal wolf. Before I started reading, I did set up a little game for myself, which was a game that I called Ali Bingo. And
okay.
I thought that I would sort of brainstorm the 5 cornerstones of the Ali Hazelwood universe. So I thought science, consent, birth control, virginity, small girl, big man.
That is so good.
And I will say by page 282, I had got the full house.
That's so funny. Of a 396 page book.
Yeah, some of them I got multiple ticks. So first of all, we had science. A lot of these things had multiple examples, but I just tried to pick the ones that were most annoying to me. So on page 39, she says, the thing is, humans and wares and vampires might be different species, but we're closely related. What sets us apart has less to do with the occult and more with spontaneous genetic mutations thousands of years down the line. And of course, the values we developed in response, a loss of a purine base here, a repositioning of a hydrogen atom there, and ta-da, vampires feed exclusively on blood, are wimps of the sun, and are constantly on edge. So I thought, hopefully this is the end of the science shit. And to be fair, there wasn't that much.
No.
Like we had some shit about the windows, we had some shit when Anna was sick. But other than that, minimal science shit, which is the way I like it.
Yeah.
Secondly, on page 47, I got to tick off my small girl, big man. And amazingly, she's not the smallest girl in the world, but as we just discussed, of course, he is the biggest. Although, to be fair, he is the alpha.
It's true.
So
Ali's hands were tied. Yeah.
Sorry, guys. Then on 82, I got to tick off the virginity part of my bingo card. And she said, which I thought, again, was quite funny. By all means, then, let's embrace tradition. Should we slice my palm and drip some blood on the sheets, hang them from the public square? His eyes close briefly and he grits out, I doubt there are any expectations of virginity on your part. Fantastic. I love surprising people. It's a great way to set it up. It makes sense. She is abhorred by the vampire people because she's a traitor, but she's not a human. Obviously, she's not a werewolf. She doesn't have anywhere to fit in. She has one person that she likes. Like, who's she meant to have slept with? She's got us. She's got us by the plot.
Good job, Ali.
That's what you need to do. Then on page 188, among other times, we had the consent check before he marked her. He said, misery. I jot back to him at the command in his voice. There's an angry V between his brows. I need your explicit consent. Do I have your permission? He did say this quite often.
And again, I know I shouldn't turn my nose up at basically any mention of consent in books, but it did feel a lot more organic. And I think, like, one, because of the way that it was written, I think it was just a bit more sort of conversationally or logically written, but it does also potentially have something to do with the fact that, like, yeah, that could be a were tradition. I mean, it's sad that the logic has to make more sense in a fantasy world, but it sort of did to me to a degree.
The last one that got me the bingo was the condom conversation on page 282. And she says, Lo makes a stupefied sound. Condom, I gasped. Not something vampires ever use, but maybe wears do. Do you have one? He goes back for one last nibble before turning me around. No. Then they go on. She talks about him. But do you want to use something? We don't need to. I will say I was a bit confused by this conversation. I didn't know about knotting. I think when the book first came out, I had heard a little bit about it, but I knew that I would read it at some point, either for the podcast or because I'm the biggest Ali Hazelwood stan in the world, apparently. But I sort of wanted to keep it fresh for my reaction while reading. So I didn't really know what it was. But I was a bit confused about like the condom conversation. I think as she was, and I think that's how it was meant to be written.
Yeah.
Like she was like, wait, what? Like, what do you mean?
I was a bit confused by it too.
And once again, she's got us by the plot.
Good job.
So thanks, Ali. I got
God.
bingo. I won a $50 voucher to the local garden centre.
That's such a good bingo. Oh my God. I also had kind of heard of knotting in association with this book. It was the only time I'd heard of knotting. I'd never heard of it before that point. And like you, wanted to keep it fresh. But I read it and was still a bit like, I don't really understand what happened. And I had the mortifying experience of looking up on my phone, I will add, looking up like knotting explained or what is knotting or something, and then realizing I was connected to the work Wi-Fi. Just being like, oh, please,
I meant
God.
scouts.
Yeah.
I meant Girl Guides.
Please, nobody be monitoring this. What about Lo? Did you like him as much as you liked Misery?
I think I liked Misery more, but I really liked him. I thought he was nice. He was a nice brother. He seems to be a good leader. He seems to be rational. I like that he can tell when people are being honest. Where it sort of fell apart for me in the reading experience was after they went to visit Governor Davenport. So they go back to her apartment and get it on for a little bit. And then she somehow realizes, side note, I don't know how she didn't realize before this point, but somehow realizes that she is his mate. And she's like, well, this sort of explains it because I have like these feelings towards you and like you smell different to me and I'm not really sure what it is, but I think I know what's going on here. And he just immediately shuts down, rejects her, and then that's it. And that's when she gets taken to her father and like all that shit happens at the end. But I just felt like that wasn't really where I thought the story should have gone. It didn't make any sense to me. Just like, why did that happen?
100% agreement with you. That's the exact point where I was like, oh, what? Hang on. Because it didn't really make any sense for him to be rejecting her. And I think later on he explains that he was pushing her away because he didn't want her to feel beholden to him. And he wanted her to have a choice about like who her mate was, or didn't want to, because, you know, Misery's this character that's been the collateral. She's always like put others before herself or put duty before herself, and like once again was doing that in like agreeing to this marriage of convenience, or even in like going to look for her bestie Serena, who we haven't addressed this, but she thinks Serena is behind werewolf lines. But he's like, yeah, I didn't want to make another choice for you, but like in doing so he did. And it just made no sense.
It also doesn't make any sense because she has made the choice free of any intervention on his part. She's not beholden to any otherworldly tug or pull or anything like that. Like she has come to this realization herself. She's like, this is my choice. And he's like, not allowed. It just didn't feel right to me at all.
And also to have this extremely intimate moment. I mean, they're not having your run-of-the-mill sexual encounter.
Yeah.
And this is also one of a handful now of sexual encounters she's had. And to have that, like, yeah, very emotional, intimate moment and then to reject someone is pretty foul behaviour. So that was a black mark against his name.
It was a real Edward Cullen at the beginning of New Moon moment.
There were a couple of points throughout this book where I was like, is this a dig at Twilight? Like there was a section where he was explaining the mating bond and Misery said something to the effect of like, oh, that doesn't seem fair to form this connection with someone who has no say in it. And he was like, We're not animals. It's completely one-sided. Like, we don't act on it, blah, blah, blah. And I was like,
Well, I had another quick little link to Twilight. The very first thing that struck me when I first opened my copy was that the font appeared to be almost identical to the font in Twilight. And I did so much research to try to find just how closely related the two fonts are. I found on the Reddit Find a Font that the font that the Twilight series is written in is Garamond 3LT Standard, thanks to Lucky_P_2005. But unfortunately, no one at the time of recording had answered my pleas to find the Bride font. I did post on Reddit.
When you did tell me that you were on Reddit in a not very active...
And it's not active. I can continue to confirm that.
I was like, someone will definitely reply to you with no information. But yeah, now I now see you're not getting an answer.
I studied the two quite closely. I tried to use AI. I tried so many different things. Didn't really give me the answer that I wanted. I could see very small differences, like the W's were intertwined differently, but it did hit me the second I opened it. But the more I look at it now, it does seem less similar.
Another thing that's kind of tied to the design of the book is the cover design. Unfortunately, this did have a negative impact on my reading of Low because Misery is portrayed as a vampire, but then there's just this like large, shapeless wolf in the background.
What is going on with his eyes?
Glowing eyes.
I hate the
two little eggs.
I hate them.
And like...
There's no shape.
There's no shape. There's no pupils. If he's a hot man, please just put a hot man on the cover because I unfortunately did spend a lot of time battling against my worst instinct to picture him as a dog at all times, or a wolf.
Yes. I also had to battle against the fact that he had a buzz cut.
Yeah, I read it, ignored it. Also, green blood, yuck.
Weird.
And I thought like maybe this was a thing. So I did Google dogs green blood and it gave me like a bunch of diseases that I did not care to know more about.
It does feel like he's sick. Just the thing about the dog, or the werewolf, I guess. I do have to say that on page 252, when she's in her cupboard and he comes in after she's woken up from being quite ill, and he's still in his wolf form and she's patting him. I thought that was so much more lovely than any scene in, I guess, Eclipse when Bella was interacting with Jacob, like when she was patting him when they were in the clearing watching the vampires train for the newborn army. That just creeped me out in Eclipse. Like I just, don't touch him. Like, gross.
Yeah.
She's meant to be with Edward. Anyway.
Yeah. And also it's like, it's just so many layers of like, no thanks. It's like this 16-year-old boy who's like made so many unwanted sexual advances on you is so certain you're going to fall in love with him, transforms into a dog. There's the element that you know he's naked now because all of his clothes are ripped off.
True.
And you're touching him and he's like, I don't know, liking it.
And Edward has to stand there and listen to Jacob's thoughts. And then the rest of it, also like quite embarrassing for him to be in front of the rest of his family when she's there like, Jacob, don't lick me, that tickles. Like, ew, I hate that whole scene. But this one I really liked. I thought it was like quite nice when she was like scratching him and he fell asleep. And I don't know, maybe there's something wrong with me, but I did like that.
Nah, again, I was also like, not bad.
I think in general, the werewolf behavior I was not into. Like the sniffing at the wedding, not into that. I was like, what are you doing? Why are you pinning her to the altar? Like, this is weird. Can you not control yourself? Like, I thought this book was going to be way different than what it turned out to be. I was disgusted by that. When he started talking about the marking, I really, really thought that he was going to piss on her. And I thought if he's going to piss on you, I'm going to scream. Like, this is awful.
I actually didn't think of that at all, but yeah, that makes too much sense. And I honestly wouldn't have been surprised to find that in this book.
No.
I was pretty perplexed when Juno came running out of the woods naked and then was like sitting next to Misery naked. And I guess it's because her clothes fell off ripped off, or she just wasn't wearing any because she had like transformed as a wolf, but it was just like never addressed.
It was weird.
But then I did like at the end of the book when they transformed in that room with her dad and Vanya and whatever. Afterwards, one of the other werewolves was like, what did you think happened? Did you think that the clothes ripped off and we had like a little werewolf like bow tie on or something?
I have one last question about the werewolves, and that is, did we ever get confirmation on why he needs to eat her out after she came? Is that just because he's so turned on that he can't help it, or is it a werewolf thing? Like he's compulsed, like it's
true.
a compulsion.
No, I don't believe we ever got an answer. While we're down in the gutter,
I just have to bring up the fact that you said at the start of this episode that I needed to be careful because we want to not have an explicit rating where possible.
Okay, well,
for this episode, you said that. Anyway, keep going.
It's fine. We can cut this out. But I just, one of my notes that I uncovered from last night, like, 20 past 12, burning the midnight oil, summarising my thoughts. I wrote, don't really get why he was rejecting her, question mark, question mark, question mark. Was it because he was so terrified of his cum pumping pipe? And then I wrote brackets, picturing one of those big cement truck things, close brackets.
It's a good question. I think it's a fair question.
So gross. You know what? We might talk about it more, but like I could care less about the nodding. I was like, okay, this is happening.
Same.
Whatever. But then the line that got me was at the end when she was like, then we settled in for the long haul. I was like, oh no. Jesus. I don't think we really need to keep this in as well, but there was something like some logistics that I just could not. Just like trying to visualize this, it takes very little, just a few thrusts through my folds, but we're on the brink. The blunt head of his cock is bumping against my clit, but it's already gone through the folds.
Unless it's like
how
hot
dense,
dog situation.
How dense are her folds? And then it says, and when he pulls back out of the folds, it's caught against her entrance, so he pulls back. Like, what shape is his penis? How is the head of his penis
in the folds?
In the folds,
against
but also
clitoris.
touching her clit, and then back. It's just like, Ali, gonna need someone to run their eyes over this one, because, again, I might gross myself out too much to include this in the episode, but just like, he did really start to gross me out in the end when he was like, you're so warm inside, so wet, just for my knot. I was like, oh. Just quickly moving past it. When he's talking about like biting her, and then he's like, you'll wear your hair up and people will see it and they will know that I took my beautiful vampire bride the way wolves do and that she loved it. And you will be good for me and let me, won't you? Calm down.
I've blocked all that out from my
Calm
mind.
down, please. Please, I was almost respecting you. Ali has also redeemed herself with the female friendship in this book. After the absolute atrocity that was Anne and Olive in The Love Hypothesis, alleged besties who do not speak, do not communicate, I was shocked to find that I didn't hate this friendship. I really liked it. I liked the character of Serena. I actually was quite shocked by that plot twist as well, which was good because there was absolutely no mystery about like what events would unfold in the plot up to that point, like the mate thing, you know, all the betrayals, like blah, blah. That was expected, but the Serena thing caught me off guard.
So often we have the criticism that all of the characters are just like carbon copies of one another, but I think there was enough difference between the two. Their personalities were fleshed out. Like we knew that they were different, which is so nice to read once again.
Yeah, and again, Ali had us by the plot because at the end when Serena says, you know, like I've grown up with you my whole life hearing about how gross werewolves are and like how much you hate them and blah, blah. Got us by the plot again. That makes perfect sense.
Once again. I thought it was funny when they were sort of being held captive together she asked Serena what she's been doing, and she's like, oh, I've been reading, but the books here are shit. I'm always here for Catcher in the Rye slander.
Yeah, same.
But I also liked how they got out of that situation. Like, it wasn't like, you hold the door and I'll get the guards. Like, it was full of mistakes and it was a bit clumsy. And when they got out, they were like, what the hell do we do now? It seemed realistic once again.
All of the other characters were pretty forgettable for me. But I will say, again, extremely shocked to find myself not hating a child character. Although I will say, I do think a 7-year-old should be able to say misery.
I had the same thing about most of her dialogue. I liked her existence.
I think I liked the plot with the half weres, half humans, the political stuff between the weres and the vampires. But I do feel probably the number one thing that let me down in this book was that it was a bit maybe unclear about what it wanted to focus on, because I don't think it did the mystery around Serena's disappearance extremely well. I think there probably could have been more focus on Serena's disappearance. It was just sort of like Misery kept forgetting that Serena was missing because she kept having sex with Lo. And like, it was never really up for debate whether they were going to be together. They were always going to be mates. It was so obvious from the start that he was going to be attracted to her, in love with her, whatever, that I don't think it would have hurt to draw that out longer, focus less on the sex. It would have been fun to see a marriage of convenience that was more them working together than just like sleeping together.
I did enjoy when they went to visit the old Alpha's widow, and I thought that was like an interesting dynamic between the two of them. Like, there was still that sexual tension there. They hadn't resolved any of that yet, but they had plans. They were doing like espionage, undercover work. I thought the scene where they were about to be caught in her office and he was like, quick, bite me, feed on me. I thought that was great, like a great way to keep that tension going, but also keep working together. But then it sort of fell apart a little bit after that because they just couldn't stay away from each other. So I would have liked it if that could have continued on for a little bit longer before they just started being all like lovey-dovey. But I guess she was like poisoned and she did nearly die. So that sort of had to put a stop to that.
Yeah, that's true.
I guess. The only other character that I sort of want to talk about quickly is Owen, because how come her name is Misery, which is like maximum levels of whack, and then his name is Owen, which is maximum levels of boring. How does that happen? And like, we did get that little brief explanation about how the council chose Misery's name, but Owen? Are you kidding me?
I am so happy you brought this up because it was in my notes and I just glossed over it. But I saw a review where someone was saying, like, how do people not have secondhand embarrassment from reading a book where the characters are named Misery and Lo? And this is something I was speaking to you about recently, that like that's sort of an automatic do not pick up for me if I see a character with an unusual name like Scout or like Griff or something like that. I'm like, nah, yuck. Didn't have that here. The reaction was to the name Owen. Like, it's like awful. Like Xavier, like Owen.
I did actually have a reaction to Misery. I just remembered. So I did my favorite thing and recorded a voice message, because normally if I was reading a book and I had this kind of reaction, I would send a voice message to you. But because we're like, keep it secret until recording, I can't. So I have to get it out in some way. So this is what happened.
I just read the blurb as I was about to start reading, and this is literally what I did. I was doing it out loud to see how many hard words there's going to be when it comes time to read the synopsis. I went, misery luck.
It is awful. I mean, and it just really thought that I was going to be reading a different kind of book. I thought I was going to be reading like high fantasy. Like,
yeah.
But I was pleasantly surprised.
It is weird. Like, the names don't match the characters or the setting or each other.
It's weird. But is that the point? I don't know.
Who knows?
I just remembered one more thing that really, really disgusted me, and I could not handle the fang talk, and I might throw up when I say this, so sorry in advance. But when she said that she used a cheese grater on her fangs, that made me want to shrivel up and die because she had seizures. Oh, it's awful.
No.
And I hate it. And I don't want to hear about the fangs. There is a sequel coming out. I don't want any more fang talk.
No.
Even the feeding talk grossed me out quite a bit. I don't want to hear about teeth piercing skin. I don't want to hear about blood.
The word suckling, I don't want that.
Mm-mm.
I did hear the word glands more times than I cared to as well.
Thumping and pumping and buzzing and flowing.
I really couldn't get around it as well. And I think that was sort of like my sentiment at the end of the book where they were knotting and sucking blood at the same time. I was really like...
And then like add into that the biting that is sure to come as well. And like...
Putrid. I mean, respectfully, putrid.
We don't yuck someone else's yum, but this is fictional, so we can.
Oh my God.
She's got us by the plot. We can.
I mean, I was eager to know more about knotting, and we had a very narrow range of requests for what to talk about when it came to this book. It was exclusively knotting. And like... Yes, on a level I'm horrified, and on another level I simply don't care. But for those who, up until the end of this episode, will have had no idea what the heck we're talking about, here is an explainer from Wattpad. How do knots work? A knot is when the base of an alpha's penis, or in a female's case, engorged clitoris, swells and locks into an omega's uterus. Basically, when they're about to come, blood flows to the base to lock them in, and they're stuck until the blood moves on or they're completely finished.
I was looking on AO3 to see if I could find any fan fiction that sort of expanded on this knotting phenomenon in these books. And I did read one where he explained that to her, pretty much what you just said. And she was like, wait, I have a great idea. It was like an alternate universe where he didn't knot. And when he was about to knot, she started feeding and took the blood away from the knot. So then they were able to have like normal people sex. And I thought, why? Why did you write this? Like,
I love this universe, but goddamn am I repulsed by it.
So funny. Okay, so we are about to open a hand-drawn diagram.
Wow, this is incredibly detailed.
It looks like somebody's biology homework.
I think the concept of it latching onto the uterus is where they really lose me, because I can kind of picture it going into like a vaginal canal, getting, what was it? Bulbous glandus, and like just being too chonked to come back out. But the uterus thing is really lost on me.
That was from Liminal Kitty 369 on X. Thank you. Didn't help me though.
Maybe this will help us. The unofficial guide to the Omegaverse on Wattpad, the ins and outs of knots and knotting. This post by Velvel Yami on the unofficial guide to the Omegaverse says, knots are usually found in canid species. This is usually a tissue attached to the shaft of the canine and is what ties two canines together during mating. This is to ensure the mate catches the sperm and is usually kept strictly inside the mate. The knot itself is a tissue that swells during intercourse and is filled with the fluid that ensures it stays swelled. When this occurs, it is called tying or knotting. It is usually fully swelled when an alpha is close to climax, and then it is shoved into a mate, subsequently tying or knotting. When the knot is fully shoved into the cavity of an omega, it becomes essentially locked inside. This is due in part to the muscles of the anus or vaginal cavity clamping down on it from pleasure, and the knot being abruptly shoved in. Violent. Essentially, the body can't adjust nor resize/shape in time to easily release the knot. Once the knot is in, it usually stays in for 30 minutes, an hour, or longer. This part is up to the writer. However, during this part, the shaft is able to release sperm into the body without any seeping out. The amount released during this time is up to the writer, and if they want to specify the amount released, or if they want to exaggerate the amount released, that's totally up to them.
We are learning a lot today. I don't know if the word is interesting, but I did expect to be more interested by it. I sort of just thought, okay, that happened, and then I moved on.
I kind of thought it was going to be like some sort of pack, like a rat king, but for like
a what?
A rat king.
What do you mean?
Like when all the rats latch together and form the rat king.
I don't know what you're talking about. Is this a real thing that happened?
I don't know. I'm actually unclear. Let's Google. Yeah. Jesus, it's real.
Laura's lost her mind.
A rat king is a collection of rats or mice whose tails are intertwined and bound together in some way. This could be the result of an entangling material like a sticky substance such as sap or gum, or the tails being tied together. Originally comes from a German term, Rattenkönig.
Oh, I hate this. Oh, I've just Googled it. Yuck. Oh. Oh, yuck.
It was translated into French, Roi de Rats.
Oh, it's awful. That's worse than the naughty.
Well, that's what I thought it would be. I thought it would kind of be like a rat king, but with penises, and misery would be in the middle of it all.
So you thought there would be multiple peni?
Yeah, I believe that's the technical term.
Like from multiple people, or
Yeah.
Lo had more than one?
No, I thought from multiple people. I thought
okay.
it would be like, you got to deal with the whole pack.
I thought there would be like long, like spindly fingers or something, like reaching in and grasping. I don't really know what I thought. Anyway, really glad we've unraveled all these knots for today.
A rat king found in 1930 in New Zealand. Displayed in the Otago Museum in Dunedin, was composed of immature black rats whose tails were entangled by horsehair. It's actually just running through all of the rat kings that have been found through history and where they are.
I don't like Rat King. A little more than a month ago, Ali announced via her Instagram stories that she has turned in the draft of The Bride sequel. What are you hoping this covers?
I am not hoping for a sequel, is probably the long and short answer. I'm assuming it will cover Serena and that random wolf.
You're right, yeah, which is so unfortunate because if we do have to have a sequel, I don't know, why can't we have something just with Lo and Misery doing something exciting? If we have to have one at all. But yeah, it is Serena and Cohen's story, which is very upsetting to me.
Careful there, Ali. You're heading down a very dangerous path.
That was one of the main problems I had with the collection of novellas because they were all like loosely linked. There were 3 tiny girls that all got with massive men and the 3 tiny girls were besties. And we've talked about this so much, but I just think it's so cheap. I don't really care about anyone else.
I feel like we're leaving less mystery than ever before, but if you could answer the question, who is your favourite character, who would it be?
I think Misery, which is a shocking twist.
Agreed.
That's great.
In an Ali Hazelwood novel, not hating a female protagonist, picking her as a favourite character, like never in any universe would I have believed it.
It is a privilege and an honour to be able to say these words, but we are not misogynists, and it is confirmed.
Ali, you have truly fed us humble pie today, and we are so thankful.
I think we need to give her a round of applause because compared to the feelings at the end of the episode of The Love Hypothesis, we're on cloud 9 at the moment.
Yeah, I'm dizzy.
Laura, you were ready to like pack it all in, like sell everything you own, disappear into the forest.
I'm moving to Italy.
But this is great. Like, we're not going to read the sequel. I'm pretty sure I won't read that. But I will read the book that comes out next year because this has left me with nothing but like optimism. Fantastic. Who was your least favourite character, Laura?
To be honest, nobody's really jumping out at me, but I think probably my least favourite character would probably just be her father because he was, I mean, obviously a bad man, but also participated in one of the worst elements of the book, which was just that kind of like exposition info dumping at the end when it was like, and the best part of my plan, and no one could stop me, like blah, blah, blah. So that was like probably the worst element there.
Like you, no one's really jumping out at me, but Juno I think was quite antagonistic, but I did like how she came and apologised, nipples out. So maybe, I don't know. Probably her, but not many negative thoughts about her.
Now it's time for us to tie the knot on this episode. The final question we need to answer. Do you rate this book, Bridget, lit or shit?
I rate it lit. What do you rate it, Laura?
I rate it lit.
Wow, what a surprise.
Crazy. crazy. I need to lie down.
Yeah, this has taken it out of me in a way I didn't expect. By the powers vested in me, I now pronounce this episode over, but our next bonus chapter and final episode for the year will be continuing the vampire theme by reading Life and Death by Stephanie Meyer. Make sure you subscribe to the show, and if you want to be on the same page as us, follow us at talklit.gethit on Instagram and TikTok.